So thank you all for joining us this morning for our second applicant information session. My name is Vita Bird-Perez, and I am one of the co-chairs for the Grant Review Committee. Also presenting with me this morning is Jessica Graham, who is the co-founder and president of Impact100. So the purpose of today's presentation is we want to make sure that you all understand the purpose behind our grants, as well as the steps required to apply for funding. We want to share with you what we will be looking for in applications and how these applications will be scored. So we will be holding 30 minutes at the end for questions. So if you could hold your questions until the end of the presentation, that would be appreciated. And you can also put questions in the chat as well. Our roadmap for today, I just did the welcome and the purpose. Jessica will be going over the mission, the grant model, and types of funding. I'll talk about the eligibility and the focus areas. And then Jessica will wrap up with how to apply, next steps, and the timeline. And then of course, we'll save the time for questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Vita. Good morning, everyone. So, we're in our second year at Impact100 Houston, and we are essentially a women's collective giving organization. We're one of 60 chapters across the world, really. And we believe that by coming together, we can empower women and create a greater impact on the local community. Vita, did you say something? Vita, are you good? Okay, we'll go to our next slide. So our grant model, and like I mentioned, we're one of chapters across the world. So we didn't invent this, but every member donates $1,000. We have a recruitment period that closed on February 28th. Every member gets one vote. The nonprofits, you all, will submit a LOI by the end of March. Then the grant funding amount, well, we did announce it, so we haven't put out our press release, but we will be giving away $241,000 this year. So we'll be talking to our members to figure out, and no, I don't even know if Vita knows this yet. We had a couple of people sneak in after the deadline, so it's actually going to be slightly above that total as well. So we're very, very excited. So what that means for you all, and as you're thinking about your LOIs, and Vita, I'm sorry if you're going to touch on this later, but write your application for $100,000. We'll be giving away 2 $100,000 grants. We are not sure what we're going to do with the remaining funds yet. We're going to pool survey our membership and ask them. Last year, we had $88,000 that was divided by 4. So we had 1 grant of $100,000 and 4 grants of $22,000. But our membership gets to decide what to do with anything that's not an even $100,000. So more to come on that. But for all intents and purposes, when you're writing, write for $100,000. Nonprofits, then after the LOI process, you'll submit your grant proposal between May 1st and May 31st. The LOI is really just to make sure that you meet the most basic of our requirements before you take the time to fill out a full application. So that should be relatively straightforward. July and August, our members will be reviewing proposals and then select the semifinalist. And Vita will touch on this more, but we have 5 different categories, and we'll have multiple semifinalists in every category. In September and October, our members will conduct site visits and then select the finalists. Last year, we did the site visits virtually. I don't know if the Grant Review Committee wants to continue to do it that way, just because of sort of the fairness across, it kind of levels the playing field for those of you that have a different, an office versus something that's more visual or an experience. But they'll share that later. as we get closer. And then on November 3rd, mark your calendars. That will be our annual award celebration. And that's when we will announce the grant recipients for the year. So the types of funding. We try to use a trust-based philanthropy approach. That being said, we are a women's collective giving group. So we have 240 plus women who are coming in with different experiences, right? And this is a bit tricky for the nonprofits because it's going to always evolve based on our membership and what's attractive to them. But we invite you can apply for a specific program, general operating support, or capacity building. We really want you to apply for what you need. So it's really up to you. The proposals really how will it strengthen your organization and your core mission, and why is the request being made now? That doesn't mean we want you to create a new program for funding or do anything outside of the scope of what you already have in your strategic plans for the year. But why should we fund it this year? And how will the size of the grant make an impact on the organization and the people that you serve?
And so I'll talk a little bit about the eligibility requirements. And so in order to be eligible for one of our grants, you have to be tax exempt under 501c3, the IRS section 501c3, independent of a financial sponsor. But if you are a local affiliate, you can apply under the 501c3 status of your national organization. You also have to serve residents of Harris County and possess at least 3 full years of independently prepared, reviewed, or audited financial statements. And so as Jessica mentioned earlier, and as many of you know, we have 5 focus areas in which you can select to be for your grant proposal to be reviewed. The first is arts and culture. And this is, if you have cultural programs, participation in the arts and arts education. Family, which is strengthening and enhancing the lives of children and families, including seniors. Environment, conservation and preservation of natural resources. Environmental justice, creating parks, and recreation. Agricultural sustainability, environmental education, and climate action. Educational opportunities for children and or adults, especially those that address lingering educational disparities affecting our community. And finally, health and wellness, which focuses on improvement of people's mental and or physical well-being. And we know that many of you have projects or programs that you'd like to apply for funding for that can fit into several of these categories. And so just choose the one that most aligns with your project. Also be mindful that, there is a chance that we may call you if we feel like, one of the other focus areas fits your program or your project a little bit better. We may call you and ask if we could move you to a focus area that we feel better fits.
Vita, before we move on, can we just mention, is it okay if I do that real quick, the winners from last year? Mm-hmm. Just to give everybody a sense if they don't already know. So the $100,000 winner was, that was for family, and that was Angela House, and it helps women returning from out of prison. The arts and culture was Theater Under the Stars, and they had specifically asked for funding for their River program, which helps children with developmental differences. For environment, we funded Spark Park. Education was Chinquapin, something specifically around mental health for their students. And then for health and wellness, we funded Kids Meals.
Thanks, Jessica. So what we don't fund debt reduction, operating deficits, interim or bridge funding, or endowment funding. We don't fund individuals or private foundations, activities that are religious or political in nature. And I do want to make the distinction that, you can apply if you are a religious organization, as long as the program that you are applying for is not religious itself. I don't know if that makes sense, but you can't, it can't be for to instill religious ideals or values. We also don't fund drives, annual appeals, fundraising events, or capital campaigns.
And we had received a question about capital campaigns. We won't provide funding for a formal capital campaign, but you are allowed to ask for capital expenses outside of a campaign, if that makes sense.
Okay. And just talk a little bit about our funding preferences. They are organizations with programs or services that target underserved or marginalized populations. Your proposal should highlight unmet needs in Harris County and have a high impact on beneficiaries or communities. We prefer organizations that are led by a staff and board that reflect the diversity of the populations they serve. And then organizations that can demonstrate that the grant will have a measurable impact on organizational and programmatic capacity. And so each of the grant proposals will be reviewed by a focus area. And as we mentioned, the focus areas will be, so there are 5 focus areas, one for each of the focus areas that we just described. And then also the semifinalists or proposed semifinalists will be reviewed by our Community Investment Review Committee, which will take a deeper dive into the financials of the semifinalists or the proposed semifinalists. So what we'll be looking at is the strength of the organization, the proposed initiative, and then the organization finances, which will be reviewed by CIRC, the Community Investment Review Committee. And then we will have the site visit evaluation for the semifinalists, which is what Jessica talked about a little bit earlier. Okay, Jessica.
Sure. So if you haven't found it already, you can find the access to the LOI on our website. The system we use will require you to register, but it's all in one place. If you have any questions once you get there, Vita, do they reach out to Submittable directly or do they reach out to you?
So Submittable has a great help or customer service. And so if there are technical issues that you have, please reach out to them. But if you have questions about the LOI itself, then reach out to me at grants@Impact100 Houston.
So the key dates, I think we've talked about most of them for you all. Just don't forget March 31st, please get your LOI in. Once you advance to the next stage, your proposal will be due May 31st. And I would just say, if you meet the basic requirements that Vita outlined earlier, you can anticipate that you will be invited for a proposal. We're not doing a lot of screening at the LOI level. And when I say the requirements, I mean, do you serve Harris County? Do you have the 3 years of financial statements? So the basic requirements to move forward. And then November 3rd is when we would announce. And the funding would be issued in December or by December. So it would be plan for next year for your application. So it would be calendar year 2023 for your dates. Is this me too, Vita, or is this you? I'm sorry.
It's you. It's whoever.
So, our commitment to you is to keep you informed at every stage of the process. So, you will find out in a timely manner, and at the same time if you are advancing or not. And if you have any questions in between, you should reach out to Vita at grants at Impact100 Houston. And then I'm not sure if we have any organizations on here, but we had questions. If you receive a grant, but it wasn't a $100,000 grant, you could apply for funding again. And certainly if you're not selected this year, we would definitely encourage you to come back again next year. You might receive requests for additional information. So last year with the grant applications, sometimes our members had clarifying questions or needed an additional piece of information. We will keep that streamlined and have one person reaching out to you. It shouldn't be our individual members. And this is the additional documentation that you'll need when you submit. So it's all should be pretty standard, and you probably already have it and won't need to create anything new for us for this. And then when we get to the final presentations in November, so at the award ceremony, the 5 finalists, one from each focus area, will be invited to present to our members. It's a 5-minute time limit. Last year we did it in person. We will announce closer to the date whether we do it virtually or whether we do it in person again. One speaker will be invited to attend. No props, no technology of any kind, just speaking directly to our members. And at this event, our members will not be asking questions of you. So it will just be a presentation.
Okay, and that wraps it up. I will say, just to follow up on Jessica's last comment, there will be for the semifinalists or for the finalists, a Meet the Finalists event where members are invited to come and talk with each of the finalists, and they can ask questions at that time. So now we are opening it up for questions.
I'd love to ask a question.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. So as far as the capital campaign, I know you had kind of said capacity building, and then you said that parts, not the capital campaign itself can be funded, but parts of it can. Can you just clarify that a little bit? Like if we were purchasing a building, it sounds like maybe the purchase of the building wouldn't be funded, but maybe the renovations to make it ready for our community would potentially be considered, I guess.
Sure. So I would say the distinction that we're making is if you have a multi-year, I'm making this number, but $250 million capital campaign, it's probably not going to be attractive to our members. They are looking for an annual gift and they're looking for a larger impact than that. If you have capital expenses that exist outside of a formal capital campaign, that could be building renovations, could be upgrades to some kind of equipment, that would be fine. And we would encourage you for that. It's really the formal multi-year, large-scale capital campaign that we don't think would be attractive to our members.
Very good. Okay, perfect. Thank you for clarifying.
There's a question, can the $100,000 be split between operating and program costs? I would say the answer is yes. I think it's however you need it, and we certainly would consider that. Any other questions?
One quick question. The awards will be announced in November, but I heard you all mention something about 2023. Is that when the funds are received, or that's just the new cycle starting? So when you're writing your grant for the 12-year period, you should write it January 2023 through December 2023. So we'll release the funds either in, I think we released it in the first half of the funds in December of this year, but the project period should be for 2023. And then we will release the second amount halfway through. Understood. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yes. And then to answer some of the questions in the chat, the recording will be available online, and it will be available on our YouTube page.
It will be available on our YouTube page. We can send a follow-up to all of you and post something on our website with a link as well.
Yes. Okay. Let's see, it's the letter of intent, the online form we need to complete initially with attachments. So no, for the LOI, the LOI is very simple. It's just, you're basically just answering, yes or no. So it's, do you have 3 years of, financial statements, and then you click yes or no. And then there are two installment payments. One payment in, the initial payment or disbursement will be in December or January. And then the second will be 6 months after we receive your report.
But I don't want to lock us into that yet, because I don't know about that extra, the above the $100,000 grants for sure. It will be in 2 installments, but depending on how the rest of the money is divvied up, it may or may not make sense to break it into 2 installments. So the grant, it will be made clear once we know how the funds will be divided, and that will be included in your grant agreement. So it'll be very clear, but I just want to give us a little bit of wiggle room on the non-$100,000 grants.
Sure. Let's see, do the financial statements have to be audits? Do they have to be audited? I will say the preference is for the financial statements to be audited. That was a big discussion point for us last year, but we will take into consideration those organizations who do not have audited financial statements, but they need to be independently reviewed at a minimum.
We had a question about the funds being expended in 2023. Yes, that is the goal is for a 1-year grant. We hope to have a good relationship with our award winners. So if you need to roll that money into the following year, I think we would be flexible and open to that conversation. But the intention is that it's expended in 2023.
Hello, I have a question. Can I
Sure.
go ahead?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm sorry, our power went out, so pretty much maybe I'll have missed something while I was trying to get back. But my question is, my organization does work with East Harris County residents on the part of economic opportunity and recovery and resilience and learning and leadership. Now, I'm trying to see us in those kind of preferences that you have. Let's say if we decide to go with education, and we do work with local school districts to train students on how to be economically independent. Let's say training them on financial literacy, workforce development. So I'm wondering, can we fall under that category of education?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate.
Vita, there's a question in the chat. If awarded, will we have to submit reports on how the funds are spent, and would there be specific dates for those reports?
The answer is yes to both. And we have a form that you would complete.
And so how I'm understanding the disbursement, it would kind of be, you would get half of the, like 50,000 in the first quarter of 2023. You would submit a report at 6 months, and then the rest of the 50,000 would be dispensed. Is that kind of how to plan it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There was another question, Vita, around typical size of the nonprofits that receive funds. Does it have to be an
really quickly? Jeannie's on our grant review committee, and so
And they're asking if it has to be over, their annual budget has to be over 500,000.
Yeah, no, there's no, well, typical, this is our second year, so we don't have typical yet. But no, I would say that there's no typical size. Last year, our finalists, there was Angela House with a really small budget. There was Theater Under the Stars, even though they have a large budget, but the budget for the program was much smaller. So I think it just depends on, really the strength of the proposal and the use of funds that we're looking at.
All really great questions, by the way.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Excuse me, I have
Mhm.
another question. I guess maybe you have already answered this when my power went off or something, but I'll just go ahead and ask it. So how much exactly, what's your range, your funding range per organization?
So this year we have 240
We'll say one for now. Yeah, it's
$41,000 dollars to divvy up. We will award at least two $100,000 grants, and then the members will decide what to do with the remainder $41,000. Last year we divided it. We divided there was a 22,000. No, there was an $88,000 overage, and so we decided to divide the $88,000 amongst 4 organizations. And so one organization got 100,000, and then the other 4 got $22,000. So we're just not sure how it will be divvied up this year, but at least 2 $100,000 grants.
Okay, and does the grant covers expenses such as administration, salaries, and stuff like that?
It could, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? And of course, if you have any questions that you can think of, after this presentation, please feel free to email me at grants@impact100houston.org. Okay.
Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you. Take care.
Thank you for all you do for the community and for us.
Oh, our pleasure, for sure.
Amen. Yes, I love that you've grown the impact by pooling your money. Like, that's amazing. Seriously amazing. Yeah, what a great concept, really, to make a huge impact. So thank you. Yes.
You're welcome.
And I love empowering women. I love empowering anybody, but go women.
I know, yes, exactly.
All right, have a lovely day.
You too.
Thank you
Take
again.
care. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye. You're
Bye.
welcome.